It is terrific to have you on board again, the Unfiltered channel, and also on Bleav in METS as we get to welcome in. Good friend of the program. You find him on your television sets on SNY all the time, covering the Mets, former Mets GM. You can also get him, of course, on the audio side on MLB Network Radio on Power Alley during the week, Monday through Friday, and the front office on the weekends as well. He is the Duke himself, Jim Duquette. Duke, appreciate you, buddy. How are you?
Good case. What's going on? Looking forward to it. How we doing?
Hey, I'm doing well, and for the Mets, let's start here because it's like, how are they doing? Well, it depends what your expectations were, because at the end of the day, it's like, if I would have told, I don't know, did you watch Entourage when that show was on? Did you watch the show
Yes,
Entourage? Okay. So they
I
had
did. Yep.
it was Martin Landau's character. And they used
Yeah.
to say, Bob, if I told you that I could get you a script would that be something you'd be interested in? If I told you as a Met fan that you'd be 3 games out of a wild card and could play meaningful baseball at this date of the year, you would have taken that before the season, right?
No question. Like, try to go back in time. Even when they got JD Martinez, right, and they were saying, "Listen, we're going to try to, we're our expectations get to the postseason," and then you fast forward to basically, we're right there at Labor Day, and they're within shouting distance of the third wild card. Now, did I think they'd be chasing Atlanta for the third wild card? No, but I mean, it's doesn't matter how you got here, and sometimes we get overly critical of the stylistic points that are out there, and it hasn't been pretty. But this brand of baseball, especially since the end of May, is far better and different. And whether they get there or not, we don't know. We're gonna have to play this out. It's gonna be fun in September, but it's I think it's even exceeded what I thought. And it's been, I think, overall a more positive team and better record than I imagined.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think the culture has been way better than we thought, right? That was one of the big issues going into the year, that whether it was true or not, that fans had put on the stigma of the leadership in the locker room and that there wasn't enough fun and they weren't together. Those are no longer questions. And
Right.
obviously, a lot of that comes down to Lindor. And I want to get into, because we talked about this before, and you really can't accentuate enough how great he's been. And to me, how much the people who are living in mom's basement who wanted him off the team in April should, I'd like to find them now. I mean, they're somewhere
Yes.
in a milk carton. It is difficult, Duke. But I want to talk MVP.
Yeah.
There's a difference between MVP of your team
Yeah.
and MVP of the league at times. However, is it fair for a Met fan to say, hey, look, Ohtani's having a year like no one's ever had? Ohtani is a cyborg. I mean, look, he's the most talented player I've ever seen. Nobody can
Right.
do what when he pitches to, right? What he's able to do. But he doesn't play the field. And
Right.
he's been a DH. Is there an argument there? Can I put Duke, in the court of law as the trial lawyer, like in A Few Good Men, my
Yeah.
favorite movie? Can we sell that story, or is it just Ohtani's so great it's too really far gone for anybody to be in this conversation?
Listen, I'm all for a good story. I'm all for selling Francisco Lindor for consideration for MVP. And there's still plenty of time left. There's 30 games left. And I mean, let's say right now that Ohtani, you're not going to win because he's, like you said, he's the best player we've seen, and it's really hard to top. Like, Aaron Judge on the American League side has been unbelievable. Like, those two guys just stand out, right? But uh, the point on that is, two-way players have always been deemed more valuable, especially when it comes to the voting, especially middle of the infield or middle of the diamond players who also put up the numbers that Francisco has, and the leadership and everything else. So I don't think it's a stretch to say he absolutely is in consideration. Does he have a long way to go, or at least a pretty good lead Ohtani over the next best player in the National League? I think the answer is yes, because of the numbers that he's doing that no one else is going to do. Like, he's going to end up. No one has done 45 homers, 45 steals. He's going to get that, and he's probably going to get 50 homers and 50 steals, which nobody's ever done. So those type of record numbers for the voters usually weigh, heavily, even if they aren't playing in the field. So I think there's an uphill battle to some degree with Lindor, but it's worth the conversation. And if he was second or third in the voting, would it surprise you?
No.
Not
And,
me.
and the way I look at it is, you can't beat out Otani for MVP. You can't. And there's that argument like, should the best player like win MVP then every year? Not necessarily, because if Otani was still in the situation where he's on the Angels, at least there's a conversation of, well, the team's not winning and what do I care? They're in fourth place. He's not in that scenario anymore, right? And the
Right.
Dodger team has had no bets and had all kinds of injuries and other things. So he has carried enough of that weight on a team that has won. But to your point, if you finish second or third in MVP, if you finish second behind Otani, they should just give you a trophy, because it's like you're MVP for humans. Because honestly, what Otani's doing is not even, it's not really from Earth, to be fair.
Right.
And if he pitches, knock on wood, and stays healthy next year and does what he's doing now, don't even show up in an MVP conversation. But
Right.
I do think it is valuable to point out that this is as valuable a Met has been since ... And you can go back to, David Wright, right? If you want to talk about,
Absolutely.
like, there was a year Beltran certainly was, in that category, but Lindor even more so for me, maybe than both. You look at the defense, the shortstop position and what it entails. And to me, Duke, the fact that he has withstood an early kind of onslaught in New York after coming from where we're covering him. You and I were there in Cleveland. And look, even the World Series, they didn't win. He got hits, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Puerto Rico, right? WBC hit the big home run a year or two later, whatever it was, big moments. But he didn't do that here at first. And he had failure and people were all over him. Man, I can't give this guy enough credit. That's as valuable a Met. We're talking about, like, when you look back in the annals of time, a long period of time since somebody has been this type of an out in front face of this franchise, since David, for sure.
Since David, for sure. You could go to Beltran, and then maybe from there, we could probably get into some really interesting.
Like Keith Hernandez. I mean, you're going like, oh, right. Sure.
That's where I was going to go. Straw, but I think Keith.
But not the same. Not the same.
Not the same. Exactly. And really, to the leadership point of it too, like, wow. I think that you hit on something that, is just starting to get looked at and have that conversation, but we were starting to see this unfold at the very beginning of the season. And he was doing a great job with some of the young players and helping with Vientos and Beatty in particular, and some of the younger guys, Alvarez. But he's been a huge part and leader. If you watch when they win or lose, and they had that tough road trip, and going the 10-day that you're flying all over the friggin' country, going to St. Louis, Colorado, Seattle. And there was one guy that was speaking that last game when they got swept by the Mariners. It was Francisco Lindor. He was at his locker talking, and that's true leadership, for me, more than anything else, especially in New York. So in his place, like, I think the other thing you said on the defense side, like, I cannot believe some of the plays that he's made, the angles, the perfect timing that he makes, that off-balance throw where he drops his arm and he's got that kind of a sidearm angle that he'll make that's so accurate, or the play to his left that he does 360, one hops to first base. Like, how many times? Like, it's become so common that it makes it look so easy. But those are high degrees of difficulty that he's doing.
Yes, and the consistency, you could tell the work that he puts in.
Yes,
and he's a guy who you could tell really. And I go back to like the press conference where he signed and talked about that money. He knew the responsibility and the onus that was on him, right? And the obligation that came with all of that. And he's treated it that way. And look, you go back to, we're talking about the meeting itself, but everything he's done since, he's been as big a reason as any. The Mets are still here. And to your point, they've had some speed bumps, but as we do this, and this will go out in the middle of the D-back series after a win that stopped their streak. And, I want to talk about Manaea, who's, gets 11 Ks as we do this yesterday, and Severino will have another start here. You talking about expectations. If you go back to the beginning of the year, and you think about these Band-Aid kind of contracts where you get, deals where either a 2-year deal in one case or 1 for 13, whatever it is, right, with Severino. And you're thinking, okay, I want to maximize as much as I can from him, but there's really no risk because it's off the books and it's not a big deal in Severino's case. And Manaea for 2 years, not that big a deal either. But if we're bad, then I could trade him and I can go use as a rental or a year plus. I don't know that you could expect or have expected to get more. If I would have told you there's no Senga and you got to ride these two guys, you would have told me I was nuts if I said that the team was still in there. Now, look, it hasn't been perfect, but how impressed have you been with overall the way these two guys have pitched?
No doubt. I'll throw David Peterson in as an
Sure, of
honorable mention
course.
because he hasn't pitched the whole year.
Of
But those
course.
two guys, because they pitched the whole year, they deserve a lot of credit. And I think even like I'd say, I'll start with Severino. You know, that stretch maybe 4 or 5 starts ago, I think it was, where you saw a dip in the velocity. And then he came back. Then he pitched in Colorado, and he got fielded that game. You know, the opposite field home run, I think it was Jake Cave, and you're like, come on, that's a pop up everywhere else. It goes over the fence. You know, how is he going to respond to that? And he came back and he's pitched well and he's responded, and it looks like he's gotten his second wind. So I've been really impressed there. Manaea is a classic example. Steve Gelbs talked about this during the game after they played the Braves at home. And Manaea did not pitch against the Braves, but it was I think his next bullpen session. After seeing Chris Sale pitch, he said, "Listen, I can copy that." That mechanical kind of crossfire delivery, right, where he steps towards the first base side there and throws across his body and has that lower arm slot that everyone knows
of course.
Chris Sale. Everyone knows what that is. And now he's freaking dominant. He's pitching like a
11 Ks in the opener of the
number one or
D-backs.
two.
Yes.
He had 9 2 starts ago, 11 last night. So I cannot believe how well he has done. And you know what? Who doesn't get a lot of credit is Jeremy Hefner. He's done a hell of a job as a pitching coach there with kind of this band of brothers that were pieced together. You didn't know what it was going to look like.
Land of misfit toys in a lot of
ways.
Really
good cake and a good movie too.
Yeah, and it's been kind of the misfit toys in a lot of cases because you know you had Adrian Hauser in the rotation. It hasn't been perfect. Obviously, Quintana's had his issues, and you know you've had injuries with Senga and whatnot. You know, as far as the bullpen is concerned, you know they also, to me, as a group, you could not have expected that you're still here. If I tell you Rayleigh's not there, no Drew Smith, Diaz wasn't good. Then he was injured, then suspended, then came back. Right. So I think I got that in the right order.
Yeah, you got
and you've got, you got to bring in guys at the deadline. Then Nunez you got all this stuff going on. And they've kind of, to your point of Hefner, they've kind of held together. The question is now, how hard can you ride Edwin Diaz down the stretch to try and force wins? He's not at that crazy level that he was, where okay, it's a guaranteed Duke if I give him 5 outs, right? That forget it, nobody can touch him. He's not that guy right now. You may get that, but you may not get it the next time he comes out there. How careful do you need to be? I know it's not, when it's not a pitching injury, people think, okay, well, it doesn't mean you need to be careful, but he didn't pitch any innings a year ago. How much can Carlos Mendoza ride him here down the stretch to try and force some wins?
I think he's going to have to ride him a little bit. You know, there's going to be some games, and kind of looking around the league a little bit and what they're doing. You're seeing the best closers go out there, not in a panic situation with like what Scott Service did in Seattle, and then he got himself fired.
Yeah, the word being did. Yes, the key word being did. Yes.
Wow. I mean, that was panic. That was Panic City.
Yes.
At its finest in Seattle, the way he handled Munoz in the Dodger series, which kind of gets to this. Like,
but agreed.
You don't need to go Diaz for like 6 outs as an example, like you would in a postseason. But the way Buck would use him on occasion, it was Showalter would go, oh, okay, here is Betts, Ohtani, and Freeman, which they're not going to do. But let's say those 3 guys in the 8th inning, or the Braves, they're middle of the lineup in the 8th. Okay, you may go to Diaz there, right? And then come in with whoever you want to finish the 9th because it's the bottom of that lineup. I think they're going to have to do some more of that here over the next 30 games. And I, again, like you said, he's not pitching the way he did a couple years ago. I don't know if anybody humanly could do that, but it's not the same. And that slider, he just hasn't found the real bite for that slider yet. It acts like Ronnie Darling said the other night. kind of looks or acts like a changeup,
Mm-hmm.
even though because it doesn't have a big break to it.
Yep.
And I think that was a pretty good eval in my mind of how it operates. It's not that big swing and miss that we saw 2 years ago.
I give him credit for this. You go back to couple when he first came over here, and this happens all the time. Look, I saw it. I'm trying to remember his name. Was it Ken Giles, the closer that went from Philadelphia, who you and I are sitting there covering in the World Series and literally watching him just deplete and never closed again. So confidence is everything.
Yes.
But Edwin Diaz, when he came over and was throwing wild pitches and walking guys and hitting guys to end games, he had no confidence and totally had lost his confidence. Here, it seems at least mechanical. Right. I mean, and he's done a better job kind of staying down the middle because he'll bounce back and just even in the demeanor, because that was a fear of mine, because this, you can have a great season and all of that's great. But all of a sudden, then the warts start to show up and a closer can go off the reservation real quick. And he seems to, at least, you tell me you're closer to it than I am, but he seems to at least have kept the confidence throughout some of the ups and downs, and it seems to be more mechanical with him.
No, it's definitely mechanical, and repeating the delivery. And some days he has it, and others he doesn't. He has a lot of movement in his delivery anyway to try to get in this sync. And I think part of this, for him to get there, he has to pitch a little bit more. You remember 2019, people were comparing him to Armando Benitez, like his first
I remember.
season.
I remember.
First season.
Yes.
So, 2020 actually, as crazy as it was, he got his confidence back pitching in New York without fans, without them booing him, because they were booing him off the mound. And then in 21, he just backed it up and he pitched. And then, 22, the historic season. So, I do think, though, that it's not anything now where it's like mentally he can't pitch in New York or he can't handle pressure. He's already proven that in 22. It is mechanical. And it's a funny thing about mechanics. These days, you can be off such a small amount, and it makes a world of difference. They have all the cameras, the high speed cameras that can show you the grip of the baseball, and here's where you're off. But there's also a feel to pitching. Verlander talked about it the other night on the Sunday night broadcast that I think Diaz, he could get if he was pitching more. If he was a starter, he'd probably come a little quicker. And, you hope that he figures it out before the end of the season. That's all, sooner rather than later.
You mentioned them in the race chasing the Braves, which if I would have said that before, you would have thought division, and to be chasing the wild card. Look, I know people watching this certainly are Met fans not going to want to give the Braves credit and Brian Snitker, but look, no Acuna, after no Strider early, who looked to me like he was going to win a Cy Young this year. I mean, that's the way he started this season. And no Riley, not the same Riley offensive, then no Riley at all the fact that their lineup is even doing what it's doing. The Soler was banged up. They've got all kinds of stuff going on. And really, in total, none of these teams the Mets are chasing or around are that great. They all have problems. They're not, it's like you look at the Dodgers, you look at the Phillies, and then you kind of just look at everybody else. They're only 3 out. So give me what, you have to give me like a percentage number, because I always love where I always joke back to like when LeBron was a free agent before he went to the Heat, and Chris Broussard was giving out like he's got an 87, like I don't know where these people get these percent chances, but how good of a shot do you give this club if they pitch well enough from a rotation standpoint, which to me seems to be really the thing, to catch one of those teams, Atlanta right now, let's say, and go get a wild card?
Oh, I think they can catch Atlanta. In a lot of that's going to come down to probably that last series. I think it's the second last of the season, or the last weekend of the season when they face off. I mean, I think they got to stay in it at least that close. Now, they did miss that opportunity to pick up more ground. When they came back from the road trip, which I thought the 4-6 road trip. For that amount of travel,
it's fine.
You would take it if you preferred 5-5, but whatever. But when you come home and you lose to Oakland and Miami, I mean, come on, that really hurt, and that was a chance they could have made up. It should be probably one game difference at the moment with the Braves, and that feels a way different than where they are at the moment. But they can catch Atlanta. Listen, Gio Urshela is playing third. Whit Merrifield is playing second. Ramon Laureano is playing right. All three of those guys were released by other teams.
Yeah.
That's how depleted the Braves are. So that's what, like, it is
I don't
a
know how they're
completely
here.
different team.
I don't know how they've done what they again. I mean, you can't give Brian Snicker and that group and
Yeah.
the folks who are on the team. And look, they've had they didn't know what Chris Sale was going to be before the season, and they've had certain things that have worked out. Obviously, you think about Marcelo Zuna carried them right for 2 months offensively, so they had some of that. But it really is remarkable that they have stuck as well as they have. When you look, last one for me, when you look kind of landscape now, National League down the stretch, assuming Philadelphia is healthy and they stay healthy, we know it's got to be theirs to lose, but just how much better are they situated than everybody else when you look at their pitching, especially because that's the thing to me, Duke. I looked at the deadline, and it's like, who goes into a deadline that's winning even and doesn't need pitching? Starting pitching, everyone does, and their rotation already. You could line up game 1, 2, 3, 4. You already kind of know where you are.
Yeah.
Are they heavy favorites? How do you look at the landscape National League right now?
I think they're definitely there's a delineation between them, and then it's the Dodgers, and then I think it's everybody else, right? And we'll see. Listen, the Dodgers, they have some true competition now. Arizona's chasing them, San Diego's chasing them. They're starting to get healthy, and I think we'll find out more about those rotation pieces later in September if they actually pitch to the way they're capable and if they're healthy. There's so many ifs with them, but that was the same thing last year. But Philly has the fewest question marks of any of the teams really in Major League Baseball. If you kind of look at it, you mentioned the 4 starters. Their bullpen, is okay. Like Alvarado's all of a sudden gotten a little off kilter. He's scattering it a little bit. They went through a month where the bullpen wasn't pitching well, but it looks like they're back on track, and we know how good that offense has been. And their defense hasn't been perfect, but it's better. So I do think they're the most complete team. Dave Dombrowski knows how to build rosters. It's ridiculous. And Rob Thompson's amazing as a manager. So I do think they're the team to beat. Listen, they were the team to beat last year too. That's the thing. And Arizona snuck in there and took 2 from them at Citizens Bank Park, game 6 and 7 in the NLCS. So like it can be done. It just happened last year. But I think that to your point, that is right now the best all-around team in the sport, and then there's everybody below that. And I throw the Yankees, Orioles in there. If you want to go American League, you can kind of throw that. You can come up with a top 5 pretty quickly.
I look, at the end of the day, going back to where we were in closing where we started. If you're a Met fan, you're in the mix. You have the chance. You go on a run, you win 8 out of 10. Where you look at the other teams the way they are, you're probably right there. They need a 2-week stretch somewhere in here where they just go on a roll. And it's possible, and they're capable. And if they don't do it, of course, Met fans will not be happy with the season, regardless of what happened. Duke, you can catch, of course, always on SNY, as well as on MLB Network Radio, and as well as here when I bug him all the time. Duke, appreciate you, buddy. Thank you.
All right, Case, anytime.
You can get us next time, Bleav in Mets and Unfiltered anytime, presented by our good friends at BetOnline.